Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, how are you?
All right.
Good morning.
Morning. How are you? Yeah, so how is everyone? We haven't had a meeting in a couple weeks.
I don't know if I'll be able to report on it much here, but I'll be hosting a colleague soon, kind of plot twisters related, so that should be fun. Maybe more about that in the future. And much more concretely, I have contact with a lot of things at UAlbany and some things at UCSD. That my home department has its own experiential learning coordinator, who I'll be talking to next week, and then the Minerva Center that I mentioned before, who is sort of the home base for like all the main hub for a lot of like learning and research and internship stuff. Hopefully the next week I'll be speaking to them too, and I might be visiting some of them in person, which would be ideal because I need to go back in the area anyway. And hopefully some things with UCSD later in September. So, and UCSD starts much later than everybody here on the East Coast. So they're like, it's kind of bizarre to me because usually I'm starting school next week.
Right.
Basically an entire almost month later, or month and a half. So it's very, very kind of confusing for me internally. But yeah, things are in motion, and that's sort of my general. That's more of a Saturday update than a today update, but that's the latest with in those fronts.
Oh yeah, I mean, that feel free to update us on that. I think the mentorship stuff is important too. I know that you're interested in what's going on at UAlbany, what's going on with some of the other things you're doing with JoPro, so that's good.
Bradley Voigt, this is more, somewhat mentorship, but also somewhat data science. Bradley Wojtek, who is, I think, like the associate director of the Data Science Institute there. He is also, he started a nonprofit there. It's something like the
Alliance.
It's like the okay, you're familiar. Okay.
Yeah, yep. And also David Danks, I realize, is part of the Data Science Alliance, who's one of the ethics professors I really like.
Oh, awesome.
So I realized I gotta officially join that. I actually heard about it and I thought I joined it, and then I realized I didn't properly do it. So that's definitely. I didn't know Wojtek was part of it too. Like I didn't know he was involved with it much.
Yeah. I think he was a real prime mover for
Yeah. So I gotta. That's literally on my to-do list for
oh, cool.
Yeah. So that's a big thing, and on a similar note, there's a lot of I'm really excited for this fall because I have I'm not. I think we joked one time that RL was basically planning to take over a bunch of major cities in the United States.
Oh yeah.
We have Chicago meetup, we have Boston, we have stuff in the West Coast. We were in London and Oxford. But in Boston specifically, I feel like there's a really nice blend of, I don't know, social sciences and then the STEM crowd. That I think but that there's stuff going on here, and I'm looking forward to see where it goes. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, both mentoring stuff, which is, I'm glad that you mentioned that, and also slowly building out some of the working group structure things that I'm trying to do with JoPro as a coordinator and kind of incubator. So more about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's a great set of updates.
Cool.
Look forward to moving into that in the fall. I don't know if we'll be continuing with the open source meetings in the fall. we might put that aside for the winter, fall and winter.
It out about now? Like, is there? I know there's like some extensions in the like 4 more weeks for certain stuff. I don't know. That's what I was going to actually ask you about. Like, what's sort of the who's where and who's going to do what? And I think we haven't had. It's kind of tough. We haven't really had meetings recently, but also like I don't know if there's been people who have things to say that just aren't here.
Well, I know that Sarrah is in the process of submitting her project. Okay, so she's going to be joining shortly. She's on track. So the official GSoC submission date is this coming Monday. Mm-hmm. And so I talked to Sarrah about, she needed an extension. She said she's fine. So today, if she can join, we'll be, hearing about her kind of final submission and what that's going to be like. Because, we wanted to get to a stopping point, get things, kind of completed up to whatever the stopping point is. And then, she can submit that and pass because she did a very good job. And, so that's where we are with that. Now, in DevoWorm, we have 2 people. We're both getting extensions for like a month. So that's, again, sometimes you have to, that's why they have the extensions, because people have schedules that aren't, I can devote all my time to it this summer sort of schedule. So we'll be doing, in DevoWorm, we'll be talking about GSoC for a few more weeks. But yeah, I think that's a good, I'm looking forward to seeing what she's presenting on for the final, or what she did in the couple final weeks. I know we haven't had a meeting in a couple weeks, so. Okay. So, yeah, that's good. I think, again, I think we had a pretty good GSoC this year. And actually, I don't know about Shubham, what the status is there. I think Shubham's wanting to present, but I don't think they're ready today. So we might, do another meeting and see what we get from Shubham in terms of an update. But yeah, I think we're going to be wrapping up the open source meetings for this year, unless we want to do something in the fall. I don't know if we want to do like this. The slot, to me, the slot is open. I don't have anything. I'm not scheduled for anything on Fridays at this time. So I don't know if you feel like we should continue maybe with a different theme, or with a modified version of the meeting. If there's something you want to do from week to week.
I feel like it honestly. I think the answer is sort of, I don't know if it's yes and, but more like I think my answer is more, I would love to identify a project in this space, or like it doesn't have, it can be anything from, it can really be anything in a lab at all, but maybe with a slight lean towards data science, virtual reality, neurotech, kind of Google Summer of Code adjacent related things.
Yeah.
And that maybe specifically technically focused, or like let's work on a coding or simulation related project in this space. Like I think that's appealing to me. I have a few leads. Like we have many leads, but I have a few particular inclinations of a sort of data science-ish nature. Because I took a lot of the summer off from most things coursework related and focused a lot on writing and administrative stuff for JoPro. But I would really like to do some things to kind of build from what I've been doing in some of my, like the NLP course and data ethics course that I talked a lot about last year. Like that's my bias. But also like it doesn't, I don't know, like in terms of, I implicitly assume this as sort of the open office hours, whatever. But if there's a project, maybe we could just make it like project time or something. I don't know, but like that's my initial reaction.
I'd be I'd be very happy to make it Neurofedora update times.
You could do that, yeah.
That's certainly open source development, and yeah, it can kind of link into some other things because of the kind of software projects related to, obviously, like brain science work.
Yeah, we might think about this in terms of what people are currently working on. So like GSoC, we have, of course, the natural bridge to those kind of open source projects. But, I'd like to hear more. In fact, I'm going to talk about Neurofedora here. I'll pull up some things on it and we'll talk about it.
Cool.
But yeah, that'd be good to see some of that, get closer to the heartbeat of that.
Yeah, Ankur was focused on, he had, I believe, 2 GSoC students this summer too. And, but he focuses on computational neuroscience. And, I'm trying to bring back the other half of that, which is the neuroimaging. But he definitely has, GSoC projects, I think, related to NeuroML.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good to kind of tie into that.
It links into a whole bunch of, INCF stuff.
Yeah.
And like well represented on both computational neuroscience and neuroimaging. We just need to get the kind of information pages ready and up for Fedora.
Yeah.
But this is, I think it would be terrific.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Let's talk about that more sort of offline from this meeting and Slack, perhaps, or
sure. Or Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to have a really let's, as a lab, openly talk about what we want to do on Fridays, or in these, what are times we can meet in general, because I'm going to have a different availability from Bradley, from Morgan, and Alison. I kind of want to, in my ambitious lab management sense, I'd love to basically have not weekly check-ins on people's projects, but more regular check-ins about those people who do want to have either a specific involvement or project leadership of a certain kind. And we kind of have that already. Well, outside, away from the big Saturday free for all. So, to be determined. But I think it'd be interesting to talk about and see what we want to focus on for the next. Who shows up for the fall and what they want to do. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. Okay, so it looks like Sarrah's here. Welcome, Sarrah. I don't know if Himanshu had any updates before we get to Sarrah, but
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just working, I guess. The work has been really good, and I got to learn a lot of new things. And there are a few projects that come to mind, that are heavily inspired from open source software as well, which is a very good thing to see. Yeah, so I'm just trying to learn new stuff and move forward. It's very nice.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I know open source does open a lot of doors for people being involved in the project. And then you just basically show people that you've been successful in a project, and that opens doors if you can show that you've done. And of course, open source is important because it gives you the tools to do it. You don't have to be part of a super secret research team to do it. So this is a thing you see again and again with people who've been involved in GSoC. They get involved in other kinds of projects, in jobs where they're doing other things, and yeah. Just said,
This is a side thing. Like, I'm basically asking both UCSD and some other people at FLI, like, look, can I get someone to back me to pursue this grant? Because I might just shoot my shot at this grant. The FLI grant about power consolidation and AI development, like, there's a lot of things that are sort of inherent to GeoPro, and even things we talk about, like, how do we diffuse this? And I realized the grant structure is pretty amenable. Like, it's a bunch of smaller level grants. Like, it's not like a huge thing. It's a bunch of, like, they're trying to seed a lot of smaller ideas. So I realized, like, if I can get some kind of a legitimate backing for it, I think I'm gonna try to go for it. Not saying that's what we got to talk about in the meeting, but just like, hey, like, that's something that may come up in the short term, because it's due in a few weeks. But I'm still on hold about some of it. But anyway, I know we can. It's just a pain in that for later. I know we want to move on to other stuff.
yeah, I think we talked about that on one of the Saturday meetings. Just kind of like going over grants and grant opportunities. So, yeah, and so we can talk about that maybe Saturday, or as we go along in our development of it. So, Sarrah, are you ready to kind of give a presentation or talk about your final push on GSoC?
Yeah, so basically, I think the last update was around 2 weeks ago. But yeah, so basically, I've just been working on two things. For this, I was working on metrics, like those were the updates I used to give when I was trying to integrate different metrics into the simulation. So that was and even in the last class meet we had, one of the advice was to kind of find the stopping point. And so there was a push that I made, I think around 3 or 4 days ago, where it was regarding another metric that I added, which was for motivation of a contributor. And for the main functionality, I considered that as the stopping point. There are a lot more functionalities to add, but I think I can try to kind of do that moving forward as well. And so since then, I have been working on a UI sort of interface, because up till now everything was CLI based. So the UI for both inputs and sort of show the simulation. Yeah, basically up till now I was just running everything from one Python file. So now I have another Python file. I've created the UI as well in Python only. But basically, running this one script opens first of all an input dialog box, while running the existing Python file, I used to be able to take CLI arguments. So instead of taking them from the CLI, I've just added all of those here. So these are the different kinds of inputs that the user can set to shape the simulation. While this UI demo only, I will also kind of recap all the features of this. So basically, the whole project was about open source sustainability. So the motive, according to me, was to kind of simulate open source community and try to let people figure out what is the most sustainable way they could reach them. And to do that, I used the approach of kind of replacing every person or every entity that would be there in an open source community with an LLM instead of it. So it is that is how I've ended up naming this, which is LLM based agent based model for open source communities. So yeah, so in this input, the first is the number of contributors or the number of contributor agents in the simulation that the user can input. So these values are basically default values, but the user can change them as well. Next is the number of maintainers that will be there in this open source scenario. So in the simulation I have made, the job of contributors is to kind of discuss GitHub issues and make pull requests to solve those issues. And the job of maintainers is to review those pull requests and rate the code quality of those pull requests. The next is the number of issues. So for issues also I have, like to start with, basically I've created this toy project, which is the equivalent of what the GitHub code of a repository would be. And so within that, to start with, we have a few issues. And so yeah, this issues number basically, what it will do is we have a path to select the issues. So like using the path, the user can select wherever the toy repository is located in their system. And once they select that, within that, wherever the issues folder is there, the issues within that will be used. So now here, for example, you can see I've given 5 as the number of issues, but all of the issues over here there are exactly 5 issues here. So these 5 will be used, but suppose I give the number of issues as 6, then I've also made an issue creator agent, which will create an additional issue, write it over here in task6.md, and continue the simulation. So now if you go ahead with 5, the next is use ACR. ACR is Autocode Rover, which is another framework, existing open source framework that I've integrated into my project to be able to actually solve these issues. So this is their whole repository, and I'm connecting to, basically I'm making a Docker image from this Autocode Rover framework and connecting to it via Docker. So I've included all the steps of connecting to Autocode Rover and getting that Docker image in my readmes as well that I have. So use ACR basically is an option to either use Autocode Rover to solve these issues. If use ACR is unchecked, then instead of using Autocode Rover to actually solve the issues, it will just make sort of an empty pull request file and not actually solve and write the correct code. Next is testing mode. This is something I added to test the UI basically because a lot of this is behind the scenes. There is LLMs at work, and because I built the entire UI in scratch from PyQt, so I needed something to be able to just test whether the UI components were working. So basically, testing mode means all the values throughout will be random, and they are just mathematically there. But there is no LLM call involved anywhere if testing mode is clicked on. It is just an empty simulation with random numbers. The next is the decision-making algorithm. This is basically to decide which contributor among all the available contributors gets to solve these issues. So now these contributor agents have various, like in the very start of my project, I had given a presentation on what is the difference between an LLM instance and an LLM agent. So an agent is basically something that can perceive and give outputs as well, and basically perceive different things in the RL scenario. But in my project, an agent is basically, since they're trying to simulate a human, they need to have various abilities that a human will have. So in mine, the first ability that they have is to converse these agents, basically because of backed by LLMs. Whenever I need them to say either give their opinion on something or rate something, I am doing that via an LLM call. And the next thing that makes that agent an agent is its backstory. So for each contributor, I've basically included, there was a subtask in my entire project called personalization, which basically, I'll just simulate that in a different window without. Yeah, so if I just use my original script and say issues 2, so the first thing it will do is try to, first of all, get the existing issues. Currently, I have none. The next thing it will try to do is create these different agents. So to create a contributor agent, basically it will first create its backstory. Okay, first it will actually create these issues as well. So I can demo this, how an issue is being created. I've actually demoed this earlier as well. So basically it is generating an issue title, then the description, then different things, and then combining all of these, it is creating a final issue. I'll just pause this and try to demo the contributor personalization. So what I did was basically the existing issues, I put them back in pending from the solved folder, because I'd run the simulation ones before, and so they were in the solved folder. And now what it is, I was first trying to read these existing issues, and yeah, so this is how personalization is working. Basically, it is so while creating the contributor 0 agent, which is the first agent, the first thing it does is creates a role description. So now the two things that this contributor has as soon as it is created is an experience level and a motivation level. So first the experience level is set, that is set, currently it is set randomly. Once the contributor's experience level is set, based on that experience level, the contributor is given a backstory. So this is kind of a role description done via prompts. So these contributors can be lurkers, which is basically just looking at other people's codes, and I've tried to make this as similar to real life as possible. So I've come up with these various categories like lurkers or explorers or experienced individuals based on how much they contribute. So this is just kind of a backstory, because it is because this LLM call was said that this contributor has an experience of 4 out of 5. It basically means that they started as a lurker, but they turned into a full-fledged contributor, and it gives them this backstory. And once this role description is generated, it creates the system message. So the system message is basically something that now every time an LLM call is made, but it is made from this contributor, this is the system message that will be added. So for an LLM, a system message is something that is prepended to every prompt, and basically that system message kind of tells the LLM to assume a role. So that way we can ensure that all the LLM responses for contributor 0 will be reflective of their backstory, because we have included that backstory in the system message. And the next thing we do is generate a motivation level based on this backstory. Motivation level between 0 to 10 is generated based on this backstory of how much motivation they have to contribute now. So then I have these 2 decision-making algorithms that was also discussed earlier, but basically they simulate the benevolent dictator model, which is the authoritarian decision-making algorithm, and the decentralized model, which is which is basically all contributors decide. So these decision-making algorithms are to decide which contributor gets to solve the issue. So among all these contributors, based on their eligibility, like does their experience level match the difficulty of the issue, and then based on their motivation, they kind of try to bid for these in the form of discussions. So these discussions are what happen, like even in real life, if there's a GitHub issue and there is a discussion below it. So based on this discussion, they either bid or they are rated by the maintainer, depending on which model is chosen. And based on that, the simulation is passed out. Next is the select issues path, which I've already done. And then there is start simulation. So right now, I will just use testing mode, because using everything else will be too time consuming. So, sorry, just a second, because I tried to run something else. So with all the same and with 5 issues, and within testing mode, meaning all the content in the next slide will be random, I will start the simulation. So this is the kind of actual UI for the simulation that I've created. So currently, as you saw, all of this is random or default values. But basically, the simulation goes on for the number of time steps is the same as the number of issues for now. At every time step, most of the metrics within these update. This is a log box. It kind of just gives log information about the current what is happening currently. So like this is the 5th time step, and which contributor was selected, what has happened, is the pull request merged. Next is the issues column. So we start with some number of issues and we end with some number of issues. So also the issues are divided into pending and solved, and then into moonshot, earthshot, and mass shot based on their difficulty level. And then next I have these two consoles, which is basically to this one is to display the active discussion. So whenever there is the GitHub discussion going on, to simulate to simulate the bidding or rating, that discussion will be displayed here. And within and then whenever the final pull request is created for this particular issue, that pull request will be displayed here. And then next is the code quality of the existing of the simulation on a whole. So basically every issue, every pull request that is created, an LLM is called to give a code quality for that, and then the average code quality is calculated. So because these were random numbers, the different variation is not much. And then next, so all of this in the left is kind of what I call the code space, which is basically to simulate the various things within GitHub. And then on the right are the contributor metrics. So the first is this contributor. So these smiley faces are supposed to depict agents. So like we started the simulation with 5 agents, and these agents can be in different states. So starting off, all the agents will be in the available state. Then when an issue is created, and if the difficulty level of whichever agents matches the difficulty level of the issues, those will go to the eligible state. Then among those eligible ones, while the discussion is going on, the agents will go to the discussion state, and after the discussion is completed, among them only one will be selected to solve the issue. So while that agent is solving the issue, that agent will go to the busy state, and meanwhile the other agents will go back to the available state. So that, and then the next two are plots for the contributor experience and contributor motivation that I showed. So basically how that is changing over time for each contributor. So for both of these, we have 5 different lines which signify the 5 contributors. So experience only increases when in one time step one issue is solved. So in every time step, like here you can see the contributor denoted by the orange line, their experience is increased, which means that was a contributor that solved something. And 5 is the maximum experience, so above that it cannot increase. So yeah, this is kind of a recap of what I have achieved in this project so far. If there are any questions, I'll take them, and like apart from this, I just have some future scope things that I had basically I just created some GitHub issues for that.
Okay.
So I can display them.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Should I
Yeah,
go ahead?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So so yeah, within this within this board that we have, so like these are the issues and the things that I have completed during the period, GSoC period. This is what I'm doing right now, the UI. So there are still a few like things to work out in the UI. Once it is completely tested, I'll commit that, and that will close this issue. And then next I have a few issues. So the first is something that I should do soon, a little bit after the GSoC period is ending in the next week, but soon one thing I want to do to make sure this whatever is there till now is usable is most of the places have this, but I just want to confirm that there is exception handling everywhere. Basically, we are making LLM calls, and a lot of those places I'm trying to parse them. So if there is anything that I have missed that may cause an error and cause the thread to break, I just want to make sure I have exception handling done. So once this is done, the project will be in a usable state. And then I have a few more things which are kind of long-term proper features or more features that can be added to improve this framework as a whole. So the first is adding, so currently I have a code space, a whole code space which is simulating GitHub. So similarly, I would like to add a conversation space that would simulate Slack or any other software. And next, based on these conversation space, the same way that based on GitHub, I have a motivation level or experience level of a contributor being affected based on the issues they solve or the bids they make. Similarly, based on how they interact in this conversation space, we can have another engagement metric for each contributor, showing how active they are within the community, even if it is not in terms of code. And next thing is when conversation space is implemented, it would also be nice to implement retrieval augmented generation within it, so to be able to have the conversation be more human-like. Then another good to have feature would be the issue creator agent that I've created. And like as I said, if I only have 5 issues in my folder, I want to simulate using 6 issues, it will automatically create the 6th issue. So I could use the same issue to allow dynamic creation of new issues while the simulation is going on. So say once this time step 5 has been completed, someone wants to just continue the simulation, you can have a button for that, and then the issue creator can just create the next more issues that are required and the simulation can be continued. And next, one other like long-term feature could be that currently for every single issue, we have 2 algorithms, both of which are choosing one single contributor for each issue. So another thing would be maybe some algorithm that allows more than one agent to collaborate on a single issue. So yeah, these are some like future scope goals. So even in my final evaluation for GSoC, I'm supposed to submit some sort of write-up. I'm thinking of making it a blog only. So basically, like within that, I'm hoping to include all of these links of the pull requests that have been merged and of the issues that I think would be good future scope for this project.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so when are you planning to submit everything? Like this weekend or Monday? Or?
Yeah, this weekend would be ideal. So the deadline is Monday.
Yeah.
So basically till today, like just before this meet, I was trying to figure out small things within this UI. But like right now, I'll stop that. I will try to complete the blog first because that is what needs to be the link needs to be given for the evaluation. So I hope like by tomorrow I'll have kind of a final blog of the project. Maybe I can show it in tomorrow's meet if we have one, or I can just put it up on the Slack. And if that is good, by Sunday evening, I'll complete the final evaluation with the link.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we should have a meeting tomorrow, and you can show the blog post, and I think it should be fine. I don't think we need to do a lot of editing. I mean, usually your posts have been pretty good, so. But then, yeah, we could use that as the link. And so links to all the code. And you have, of course, your interface, your GUI that you're using to set up the simulation. So what are you calling from the command line and what are you calling from the GUI? Is everything called from the GUI, or how does that work?
yeah, so when we are using so I have two different scripts. One is just run LLMOSC.py. If I just call this script, then I am doing everything from CLI. And then if I run this script called run LLMOSC front end, so I just have to call this script from the CLI, and then everything else can be done from the GUI.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Though there is some repetition of code between these two scripts, but like I couldn't figure out a way to kind of make it completely modular.
Yeah.
So maybe that can be also rather like something I can try to figure out sometime later, because basically the GUI is being updated at every step. So I have that code integrated only currently.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
if this button is clicked, then call this issue, then call this, then call this. So I have functions. It's code is not in one script. Like I have functions and agents and different optimization, but then still it's a pretty long script of code because of all of the how the GUI is supposed to react continuously.
Right.
So maybe I can also try to clean that up, but I think I'll keep that for a little bit later, not as a top priority.
Yeah. I mean, that's again, we're trying to find a stopping point. So I think we're there. So yeah, good. Well, that's very good. Thank you for presenting, and good luck on the submission and getting everything in. And yeah, I know that like we looked at the project board and we saw that a lot of the issues have been addressed one way or another. Are you planning to keep working on this, or are you going to put this aside for a while, or what's the plan?
I do think like at least a few things, some of the things that are kind of not these like big, like trying to implement RAG will be a very big thing, but some of the small issues definitely think I have to work on, and like I hope for is once it is in a good, once the project is in a good position, like I think it is there now with just about more 1-2 weeks of work, it will be at a good like proper stopping point. And once it is there, I was hoping to kind of maybe try to pull it towards a publication or get some kind of like document this somehow in a paper or an article, and then like so yeah, that would be like one priority. And then like the other like the big features that I have planned, if like I want to keep working on them, but as and when I have time.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that would be good. To definitely work towards a publication, and we could help you with that. And I think we have the publication that is the sort of the collective open source sustainability preprint, and we haven't really updated that in a while, so we'll have to work on that. But also, I think there's probably another thing here that we could work on, especially with respect to the large language model implementation. So like really highlighting that, saying like what the potential is, maybe running some examples where we get some data and show like how if you set it up a certain way, it gives you, what the performance is, things like that. That's something that I think we could, at least get one paper out of, maybe two, or however we want to do that. So definitely. And then, for the issues, a lot of times people work on them after the end of the project period, but we also want to have issues that people can work on maybe next year as a student, or
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, some of those like long-term issues that I've created are completely new, like they're completely new aspects of the code. Like say implementing the conversation space could be a whole project on its own, definitely. So that is also something that is definitely possible if someone shows interest. That can be done like next year for GSoC only, or even out of GSoC.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you for the entire GSoC experience as well. It has been a very, very good experience. And I actually got to learn like quite a lot throughout on my own as well, like doing this project. I got to research a lot of stuff, but also during this entire meets related to LLMs, a lot of interesting papers related to LLMs as well, and also out of like within neuroscience as a whole. Like since the first meet, I've been saying that I come from a purely technical background, but attending these meets have like at least given me a kind of an intro to the overall aspect, the things about psychology or a lot of things that have been talked about here. So those are all also a lot of great learnings. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for being a good student. So, yeah, why don't we move on to the other thing I was going to talk about today. So, I had wanted to highlight Neurofedora since we've been talking about it in the meetings. And Morgan might want to jump in on some of this, but I'm going to go over some of the basics of Neurofedora. So this is actually the Neurofedora GitHub repository or their organization. So this is a Neurofedora special interest group providing a ready-to-use free open-source Linux distribution of neuroscientists. So this is, of course, the website. There's an issues repository where they have like different issues that you might want to open. Like, you know, people will use Linux distribution and they'll find it maybe lacking in some way or some bug that needs to be reported. So they have like a place to report things and create issues. When you have an open source distribution, of course, you know, it's not just that you're talking to some technical team. You're kind of opening it up for not only discussion amongst the maintainers, but also people to pick up the issue and carry it forward. So a lot of the things that we know when we create an issue, it's more than just say like a to-do issue, you know, like it's more than just kind of putting a sticky note on the wall. It's really about like taking that thing and saying, okay, what do we want to do? How do we want to approach this problem? Or what could we do better? Maybe this is like, you know, if I suggest that we add in like some package for like scientific computing, you know, I might just say you should add a package. Now in the Linux ecosystem, you have maybe 20 packages to choose from. So the maintainers would go back and say, okay, now what package would probably be best for our distro, for what we would like. Other people might have other issues where they want to do certain things. How do we sort of figure that out? What's the best option? So that's you know, that's a good thing to have in a organization, is to have a repository where you can file issues but also discuss them and kind of solve them, or someone can take a piece of that and work on it independently of the person proposing it. Yeah, and then there are these other things here. So this is actually, I like this one, Planet Neuroscientists, an aggregation of neuroscientist RSS feeds. That's always useful. RSS feeds of various neuroscience journals. This is the talk at the Neurofedora workshop, the workshop that was just in Rochester, and then, you know, flock to Fedora,
He does. So there's a bi-weekly, what's every 2 weeks, there's a meeting on the IRC, and there's also Ankur has a blog post that's associated with it, has the meeting notes, as well as he's got a number of kind of every meeting he'll have some neuroscience links, some updates about certainly all this summer he's had updates about the NeuroML progress, and things like associated meetings. Obviously, Flock to Fedora was kind of the big one at the end of the summer. But he does GSoC through INCF as well, and so probably will. He would have had something for computational neuroscience meeting too. And so a lot of it's just getting in particular packages. But some of it does get quite engineering. Get into some what I would like to say are kind of like real software engineering issues, especially as it relates to widely used dependencies, right? So projects like VTK and ITK are great open source developments. Long time, projects that started probably late 90s, early 2000s, and widely used in scientific computing applications, right?
Yeah.
So some of the issues that come up is like, one, VTK and ITK also have their dependencies, right? In terms of especially compute numerical libraries, so like what BLAST support is being is this being linked against, and for instance, or FFTW is there's a bunch of numeric libraries that are kind of commonly used, GSL, FFTW, Open BLAST or its equivalent. So there's issues just building ITK, for instance, is a pretty sophisticated engineering project. But then the bigger issue you have is that there's a number of kind of large projects that are built on top of ITK. And then you get into these interesting problems of trying to work out with kind of stakeholders at various levels how what ITK is built against, and whether you can build off of the system libraries or not, and anyway, it certainly brings up a number of interesting software engineering issues and kind of numerical optimization issues in terms of trying to get out a build that has kind of tools as tuned as possible for the various outlets that we support. And that would be my little pitch for the making it interesting for people in terms of these are very much the kind of problems that you might have working in a larger production software engineering team.
Yeah. So, for in terms of the user base, so this is something that is specialized for like neuroscience research or scientific research. What kinds of like variation do you have? Do you have people like different versions, or is it just come kind of with a base of tools, and then people have to kind of you've kind of figured out what people need and want?
Yeah. So technically we're other than obviously bugs and real issues like that, we're mainly just trying to target the particular distribution release. So at this point, Fedora is on a pretty steady release cycle. They will hold it up from time to time, based on what their particular feature goals were. But so there's kind of like a bleeding edge release, a stable release, and a previous release. So I think like 41, I think just made it to kind of gold master, 40's stable, and 39's the previous release, right? So I think we support those, but at the same time, like the tools should all be it pretty much be the same version of, say, 0.4 release of ITK. For like ITK 5.4 was just released from upstream, and maybe that's a goal for 41, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And then like what are the knock-on effects of that might affect what dependent applications, like say the Montreal tools, what are called the Mink tools, that might depend, that might like allow us to aim for a newer release of Mink tools because we got a 5.4 release, or the opposite, or something like that. The release targets, as opposed to it's like what people are asking for. It's like it's not so much user driven, although obviously it is for users. But we got a lot of I would say our biggest restrictions are just mainly in terms of Fedora's got very, very tight regulations about like everything has to be free software, free open source software.
Right.
And so like we can't release any of the Oxford neuroimaging tools, even though I'd like to, because it's not an open source license. The source code is available, but it's under a restrictive Oxford University license.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, because you have this
sort
of liability chain.
Well, it's very much like Fedora is a community effort, right? So it doesn't receive funding from Red Hat or IBM at this point, or I don't think it does, or certainly if it does, it comes with no strings attached, right? Yeah. And so, but what I mean by that is like majority of fMRI researchers, like honestly, use FSL software to do their processing, and it's somewhat disappointing that we can't package that for them,
Yeah.
So in that sense, I feel like we're not really giving users what they want.
Yeah.
but I'm still very happy to package everything that comes with an open source license, and that includes the software tools from NIMH. So NIMH has always had a GPL fMRI package, with processing pipelines and visualization tools. So, and anyway, so it is good. I've got great, educational materials associated with all the neuroimaging tools that we do package. And so you can very much, like, for instance, hold a workshop on the basis of the software that we've got that you can download an ISO for, and put together as many seats as you want in terms of a training workshop.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a great initiative, and building on Fedora, there's certain restrictions and opportunities that come with building on a certain distro.
No. I mean, that's the certainly one of the things with Fedora is that if you build on top of Fedora, you can be sure that as a developer you have no restrictions.
Right.
Except in the GPL sense, where you're expected to make your code available if it's got GPL dependencies. But that it is giving you a platform on which you can certainly build with no licensing restrictions.
Yeah. So yeah, that's great. Why don't I get to the other things I was going to talk about here, and we can kind of wrap it up. Yeah.
Definitely.
So we had this is the Fedora project. This is their actually this is the Flock to Fedora site. So this is where we have the Fedora project conference. This was in Rochester this year, and this is kind of talking about what they were doing. So they had the Flock, the Mentor Summit, a number of hackathons and talks and things like that. So, a lot of interesting things here. So it's just supporting the development of Fedora. And of course, Neurofedora being kind of a fork of Fedora, you can take Fedora and, plug in your own, whatever you want to put in and put out releases on a release schedule and serve your community. And so that's the Fedora. Now, the other thing we talked about was, and I'm not going to get into this too much, but there's this approach called Wardley Mapping. And the reason I wanted to just kind of highlight that is because this is something I talk about in project management. And it's basically a way to sort of identify the needs of a certain project goal or a certain set of project sort of ideals that you want to achieve. So Wardley Mapping was developed by Simon Wardley, and he sort of developed this approach where he thinks about the value of something and the commodity of something. So, if I want to say do something like build a drone network for deliveries, I have to think about this. I have to break this idea down in terms of what the user needs are, what kinds of things are needed to do the thing. So you might ask questions like, can I deliver to a certain location? And then if I can deliver to a certain location, is there stuff to deliver? Are there other things that we need to think about, like restrictions? We have to think about the practicalities, such as how far the drones can travel. So when you think about like sort of a goal that you want, you have to break it down into questions, very practical questions, and then kind of see what kind of restrictions there are on that, on what you're trying to do. So, there's a user need for delivering via drone. We go down and we say, can I deliver there? Meaning, where can I deliver things? Sometimes they don't have stuff to deliver. Sometimes we're restricted in what we can deliver where. We also have to have a location identifier so we know kind of where we're going. We also have to, take into consideration the range of drones, so we can't go, infinitely out towards any destination. Sometimes there are restrictions on where the drones can travel. And those are just yes/no questions. And, also there are weather restrictions and other things. So there are all these restrictions, and you build this map where you kind of break things out. And then you kind of draw your map out so you can kind of follow it from this fuzzy conception to a series of questions, to a series of constraints, and then finally to something that's been made. So, this is like, this example is like where you're taking images, you're storing them in the cloud, and you're allowing people to print images out. And this is just sort of a very fuzzy concept of a product, but you have to break this down into sort of what the customer wants, what the infrastructure is for this, and then what the competition is doing, and then your constraints in terms of computing and power needs and all of this. So it breaks it down into like the beginning of the project, what you have to build in terms of a custom build, what you have in terms of a product and what your revenue stream might be, and then what the commodity is with its utility. So, when we make a product, if we want to sell it, for example, or even if we want people to adopt it, it has to have some utility to it. And then, so this actually shows how to Wardley map. This is making a cup of tea. So, you have this person who wants to make a business on making the perfect cup of tea. And so to do this, you need to have a kettle, you need to have hot water, power, and then of course you need to have a customer to serve it to. So the cup of tea, you have to have cups, obviously. Tea is a raw material. The hot water that comes from the kettle, and then, water is an input to hot water, and then you have a customer getting the cup of tea. So it's just a way to really break down a lot of these things in a thing that you want to make into a set of deliverables. It's not enough just to create an issue or a set of issues for some idea. You need to have this model of, what am I trying to do? What are my sort of constraints? What are the things that are going to go into this? Are they available at certain times? Are there constraints on that? And then kind of getting that to maybe a market. Either it's like free and open source software or it's some customer base. And then, of course, you can think of like the location of these different things in an organization, like a restaurant, where you have the kitchen where all of these things are located, and then the front of the house where you have the cup of tea, table service, and some food alongside of it. Just a way to like organize how you deliver the service. So like with Neurofedora, some of the things are sort of, created in a different, you fork something that's already been created and you incorporate it into your release. Other things are things that you build on your own. Some of those things are under the hood. Some of those things are front and center in the release. And so that's how you can sort that out. And then finally, you can follow this through in, the entirety of the supply chain, even up to like, different types of ways that, you can innovate. So you have things that are sort of in the kitchen, in this cup of tea example, in the kitchen, in the front of the house, and then the artisan buyer. So you have things like, snacks that you want to serve or garnishes you want to serve in the cup of tea. And those are all sort of separate things that come from somewhere else. And you're bringing them all to the customer. And so like, with something like Neurofedora, you might have your Fedora distro, you're forking that, you're bringing in these different analytical tools, you're forking those and you're kind of incorporating them into a release. They may or may not work well together, but if they work well, then you get it released as a formal release. And then you try different things. Maybe you have to homebrew something. Maybe you try to get, other new releases as they come out, or new things to fork as they come out, new tools, and put them into new releases. And you're releasing that to the community, and then they're evaluating that. But there's also, of course, in open source, there's this feedback from what we call customer here, but it's also the user to these things like the kitchen, the front of house, and some of these things like the artisan buyer. So the users are interacting with the supply chain with this sort of set of things that you need to realize this vision. So that's also, where you can have an open source Wardley map, where you can have feedbacks from this person to these resources. So there are some interesting resources online. This is a resource for Wardley. It's called onlinewardleymaps.com, and you can actually model Wardley maps in this way, but you can write this in code. So you can actually write out the code and simulate these in this window. So this is the Campfire Coffee Shop. It's kind of like the tea example I showed, but there are other, you can model just about any project in this using code here. So I wanted to talk about Wardley Maps, and I wanted to talk about Fedora and Neurofedora. I brought that together. I hope that was useful to people.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think it fits with like this, our general project management discussion at large. And there's some project managing mentoring things I want to write that kind of talk about those processes too, and I'll mention that offline. I know we're kind of out of time, but no, I appreciate going through all that. Yeah, it was good.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So we will likely have another meeting next week, and then after that, I'm not sure what we'll do. We talked about that at the beginning of the meeting. What we might do with this spot over the fall and spring, because the next summer we'll be doing the open source meetings. But just keep thinking about how you want to structure it. If you want to do things in the fall and winter, we don't have to do things every week, but
Are we having a regular meeting tomorrow?
yes.
Set. Okay. I may be a little late to that, but we'll see. Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk to you later.